Hey guys, today I'm going to be reading The Hidden Hindu, Book 2 of the trilogy by Akshat Gupta. Please don't come after me again. I am very, very white, and I don't know how to pronounce any of these Hindu names, but it's a really good book. I really enjoyed the first one, and I was told that I should read the second and third one, so that's what I'm doing. So please don't come after me. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. So here is chapter 1. Land of the Extinct. Prithvi had been narrating the chronicles of Ross Island for quite some time. The kidnapping of Om for interrogation about the books of Mrit Sanjivani, the uncovering of Om's past, the resurfacing of Ashwathama and Parashwarma, their rivalry with Nagrenda, and the reality of Primrol and LSD, Nagrenda's lieutenants, who had been hiding in the guises of the Indian history professor and a hacker, were already swarming Mrs. Batra's head. While she struggled to absorb it all, Prithvi's new revelation raised more questions than it answers. Startled by Prithvi's claim that he was Om's son, Mrs. Batra sat up in alarm and said, "Om Shahistri is your father?" "Okay, I need a break," she added distractedly. "Do you want anything? You know what? I'll just heat up some soup quickly." "That would be great. Thank you, Prithvi smiled. While Mrs. Butcher went about her tasks in the kitchen, Prithvi absorbed the surroundings. The house was noticeably compact. The living room contained simple furniture with the glass windows overlooking a small garden and veranda. There were 2 bedroom doors and another door leading to a descending staircase. Behind him was a wall exhibiting Mrs. Butcher's achievements in the field of medicine. The framed photographs hinted that the couple had no children, that it was just the 2 of them. Prithvi's observations came to a halt when Mrs. Butcher entered with 2 bowls of steaming soup in her hands and a question on her mind. "So, what were you after all of this unraveled at Ross Island?" Prithvi thought for a moment as he blew on the steam and took a sip. "It's a little complicated. I was 21,780 feet above and 25,930 feet above sea level, both at the same time. Where would you like to go first, above the mountains or beneath the ocean?" Grimacing at the riddle, Mrs. Butcher said, "Let's just start from the top. At 21,780 feet above sea level, Om was lying unconscious at an unfamiliar location. His senses were still turning in when he heard a distant yell. "Hurry up! Ask him to come immediately." As if waking from a dream of the past, Om opened his eyes slowly. Encircling him were a few old men who were smiling down at him blissfully, none of whom he recognized, yet he felt oddly safe under their gaze. He got up gingerly and sat up straight on the thin jute mat under him. The mud-walled hut was freezing cold. The men around him were covered in brown woolen robes. Everyone was wearing the same clothes, and Om realized so was he. This must be a monastery, he assessed. When he looked around, he was confronted with his own reflection in a mirror propped up in the corner. He did not see the usual matted dreadlocks on his head or the uneven, ruffled mustache and beard on his face. Instead, he saw trimmed hair and a shaved face, and drew more attention to his features. The bare cheeks and lip line, the forehead, the eyes. He had been given a complete makeover. Om peeked outside the small window with wooden grills and saw tiny snowflakes falling softly and mingling with the bright white blanket that covered the land as far as he could see. Suddenly, a wave of déjà vu washed over him. Waking up in a hut, being greeted by unknown faces, the snowfall outside, everything added up to remind him of the time he had first met Dunyavardi and Shashruta, Om's first memory. Although that was aeons ago, one thing still remained unchanged. He still had no idea about his identity before he became Mritwanjay. He stood up, removing the blanket, and questioned the old men around him while walking towards the door. "Where am I? Who is it that has been called for me?" While questioning the strangers, he wondered who they were, but before he could speculate in his head, his thoughts were interrupted by a strong, booming voice, a voice that had become familiar to only recently. "They called me," the voice belonging to one of the mightiest combatants of all eras, answered. Ashwatthama, the cursed immortal, followed. Had met him before losing consciousness on Ross Island, where Ashwatthama had been in advanced battle gear. Here he was dressed simply in the same robes as and everyone else. Here there were no differences. Every soul was equal, and an unspoken sense of peace and mutual respect prevailed. All the old men bowed their heads in respect at Ashwatthama as Ashwatthama walked past them. He reciprocated in the same manner. He gradually closed in to see Om's bullet wound, but it was not to be found. The injury had miraculously healed without leaving any discernible scar. Ashwatthama seemed to have been expecting it and looked back up at Om's face, but already had other questions. This place seems familiar. Where am I? Ashwatthama smiled. "Yes, you have been here before. As the guardian of Mrit Sanjivani, you had wandered in the Himalayas for nearly 9 years after your reawakening. This is very close to your first home, the residence of Dunyavardi and Shishruta, the place you were resurrected." Was shaken to his core, and when he heard Ashwatthama utter those words, deep down he had yearned for this answer, but he has still not braced himself for it. At least the place that always evaded him had been found, putting his search over all those centuries to rest. His mind raced with 1,000 questions, and he did not know how to react. Gathered himself and finally spoke up. "So, we are in the Himalayan range? I could never find this place. Which mountain is this?" Ashwatthama answered with a recitation of reverence. Grasped that Adwi verse was hinting towards the pious mountain he was standing on. He joined his hands, looking up in awe, and said, "Mount Kailash, the abode of Lord Shiva, the center of the universe, the navel of the realm, the pillar of the world, the Swastika mountain, the precious jewel of snow, the Tibetan." All these names belong to one of the most enigmatic and holy mountains in the world, Kailash Parbat. "Yes, Kailash Parbat," nodded Ashwatthama. Hoping to gain more clarity, continued, "I have come to Kailash before, but had never found my home." "I know," Ashwatthama said confidently, which brought to his next question. "Why couldn't I?" "So far, no one has been successful in climbing the revered Mount Kailash, and neither will they ever. Numerous expeditions have failed to reach its summit. The mountain mysteriously changes the direction of its tracks for those who want to climb it. It is believed to be the axis mundi, literally the axis of the world, which provides a connection between earth, heaven, and hell, between the physical and the spiritual worlds." Chimed in, "Yes, I know that the abode of Lord Shiva and goddess Parvati and the majestic Mount Kailash has been a point of fascination for pilgrims and millennia. This is the celestial center of the world, where heaven intersects the earth and is considered holy by Hindus, Buddhists, and Jains. These fascinating ranges are also home to 500 souls, as some saints believe, and only when a resident soul wishes for moksha, salvation, can another soul dwell here." "Yes, and some of those sacred souls are standing with you right now," replied Ashwatthama, affirming that what thought was just a myth. Took another look around at the cluster of ascetics and noticed the calm smiles adorning their faces. These widely believed fables are all actually true. This place is Ganj, the city of Extinct, Ashwatthama confirmed. Thoughts were flying a mile a minute. It was impossible for him to stay composed, and he interrupted Ashwatthama yet again. "Ganj is often revered as a legendary prehistoric Indian and Tibetan city, a kingdom of enigmatic internal belongs. well concealed from the world. Despite existing in the deeper crevices of the Himalayas, it has an influence over mankind in several stealthy ways. This is the place where sages formulate the evolution of not only the human race, but of all conscious beings. It is often addressed with various names like Shangri-La and Siddhashram. This is the holy realm that drafts the destiny of all. No one can access Ganganj unless they have a karmic connection with it, Ashwatthama added. Om was not done yet. He was bursting with unanswered queries. Is it true that there is no death here and the consciousness always remains alive? Ashwatthama uttered the exact words Om had been waiting to hear his entire life. As I said, all myths that you have ever heard about this place are true. Om, you are finally amid the clan you were searching for. But why couldn't I find it all these years? Ashwatthama guided Om out of the cottage as he began explaining the elusive nature of Ganganj. Our city is embedded with a spiritual camouflage and exists in a completely different plane and reality, a dimension of manifestation, which is why it has managed to stay hidden from modern mapping techniques, various technologies, and satellites. Catching up with Ashwatthama, Om let the mystical place engulf him as he experienced a divine and powerful silence. Passing the southern edge of the mountain, he happened to look down from the cliff and couldn't help but stop at the mesmerizing sight before him. Ashwatthama glanced back to find Om standing transfixed and followed his gaze. That's Lake Mansarovar. It was first conceived in the mind of Brahma, after which it manifested here on earth, Ashwatthama explained as Om's eyes took in the ethereal beauty. His face lit up with awe and sunlight bounced off the surface of the water, giving the lake a holy glow. The water was mostly tranquil, but still held a hint of chaos with tiny ripples embellishing its serenity. The deep blue sitting in the middle of those snow-capped peaks was one of the best scenes Brahma had painted for Earth. It's beautiful. Om managed to muster something despite the indescribable scene overwhelming his senses. Come, we have another place to be. Ashwatthama pulled Om out of his reverie. Another short walk, they came upon the entrance of a cave. The opening led them into a tunnel, which they could easily navigate because of the presence of the bright, natural glow. Om was a little baffled to see the light, because the top of the tunnel was sealed and the source was untraceable. The tunnel continued to expand as they walked further on the other side. There was a grand opening. When they stepped out, it was dusk. Om turned around to see that the tunnel's interior was still brightly lit. Maybe these are 2 different time zones, he speculated. Om turned again towards Ashwatthama and found him on his knees, praying. His head bowed, his hands joined, in front of a flat rock platform. The flat platform was covered entirely with tiger skin and still had a ferocious feline head attached to it. Beside it hovered a transcendental, brilliantly carved, enormous trident defying the laws of gravity. Defying the laws of gravity, a 40-feet-long snake guarded the majestic trident. The whole setup was no different from the depictions of Lord Shiva meditating in popular portraits. Om always supposed that these ideas must have been fragments of the imagination of Lord Shiva's devotees, but he was wrong. They were all authentic. Now that he stood there, he could absorb the illustrations that he admired throughout the yugas were actually exact depictions of Shiva's home. The only difference between those portraits and reality now was the absence of Lord Shiva himself. Oma waited for Ashwatthama to finish the obeisance before he could confirm if this place was truly one he had compelled to believe it was. It seemed so surreal to find himself in the lap of forces mightier than him, the forces of creation, destruction, and transformation, which jointly sustained the universe. He could feel the sublime beauty pass through him in waves, changing the fabric of his being, and subsequently the whole of Ganganj. Om was snapped out of this trance by a peculiar sound. He turned around to find that it came from the flightless bird that fluttered its brownish-gray plumage, tapped its yellow feet, and had a tuft of tail feathers, a gray, naked head, and a black beak. The bird was about 1 meter tall, and judging from its gait, Om could deduce it weighed approximately 15 kilograms. It seemed to be the bird whose last confirmed sighting on Earth was in the year 1662. A dodo, he let out a loud whisper. The bird immediately noticed the unfamiliar man staring at it and waddled further into the shrubs. Om found Ashwatthama still on his knees with his eyes closed, so he decided to take a closer look at the bird, which had disappeared centuries ago and was declared extinct. Having encountered numerous beasts and birds during his prolonged lifetime, Om had become adept at identifying and responding to other creatures around him. He tiptoed in the direction of the bird and stood near the bushes it had disappeared into. There, he discovered another large and flightless bird about 2.5 feet tall. It trotted about with its black back and a white belly, looking almost weighed down by a heavy black beak with grooves on its surface. A white band stretching between its eyes almost made the avian appear blind, but a keener look showed the glimmering heads of a tiny black eyes. The wings appeared only around 15 centimeters long, rendering the bird flightless. It was another extinct species of bird, sighted last in 1852, called the great auk. Great auks were gifted swimmers, which made them impeccable hunters underwater. Like the dodo, it, too, sensed Om's scrutinizing gaze and sauntered away. Spotting 2 extinct species in a matter of minutes added to Om's increasing astonishment as he let his curiosity drive him to tail the bird. When the great auk dove down a cliff, Om came to an abrupt halt at the unexpected land's end. At the edge of a lake appeared out of nowhere. He took cautious steps towards it. The lake looked like a perfectly flat disk of metal. It was exceptionally serene due to the shimmering vacant space around it. The placid spectacle took Om's breath away. The heaven-leaking light added a golden tint to the face of the lake. Om felt heaven on earth, though he was not sure if he was still on earth or not. Maybe it was true. Maybe Kailash Parbat was indeed the only connection between the physical and spiritual worlds.